Ved Pradhamantra. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om. Today we will take up in our discussion on the Vedas Medha Janana Sukta. It has many specialities which we will describe as we proceed, and it's a very small hymn, Sukta, just four. It has just four mantras, which makes it very small, and I do not want to push another hymn here because the flow will be ruined. Now, before we get into this hymn, the speciality of it, what exactly it intends to say, I'd like to discuss the very concept of Medha. Medha. Loosely, it's translated as intellect in English, but that's not the exact translation. So we need to understand what Medha is and why the expression Janan. Janan means to give birth. It comes in Atharva Ved, first book, first hymn. Like in Rig Ved, we studied Agni Suktam. Just like that in Atharva Ved, it is Medha Janana Suktam. Now, if you look at the history of civilization, particularly the ancient ones, you can easily classify the major civilizations into four categories. Of course, there is one fifth, but that's not important. If we take the fifth, then it would mean that, well, they had some minor achievements, maybe some major ones which you find spread over the pages of history, but not really making any impact. However, the first one which really counts, which continues till date, is the Egyptian kind of civilization, which believed in creating large structures. And what is a very sad thing about these large structures is that whenever you find things going big, large, know that it is decadent, is about to be destroyed. Anything when it becomes too big, for example, if a country becomes too big, too large, it will disintegrate. If a society becomes too large, it will disintegrate. If a company becomes too big, too large, it will disintegrate. This Mother Nature doesn't permit us to have too large things. The forces that make something very large, that forces itself will disintegrate. So that we have these pyramids and all, they're there, but the culture that made it, slowly it got disintegrated. That's a very interesting thing. The second one is those who focused on life, the subtleties of life. The most important of it is the Chinese. Chinese have been very good at looking at life. In fact, if you go through the history of China, which is very interesting, extremely fascinating, they have been obsessed with life. And whatever they do about life. Afterlife is there, but life is more important. In fact, the philosophy given by Confucius, it focuses more on life. And the teachings of all their masters, they focus more on life. The third one is the civilization that has similarities with Greek civilization, where intellect becomes very important. So naturally, you might wonder that does it mean that China did not focus much on intellect? Well, as we shall see, everything comes through intellect. But what is the outcome? Now, whenever we think of the science, ancient achievements in the philosophy, etc., we always have only one name, and it's Greek. And this is also because the present Western civilization is highly influenced by Greek thought process. So, whatever is there in the present Western world, in the form of science, philosophy, thinking, free thinking, etc., all this has come from the Greek process of thinking. So, they focused a lot, and what they did was they were into analysis. That is, they went on analyzing till they felt that this is the last word. But as we will see, all these three have great difficulties. So the first one, when you're focusing too much on constructing or building big things, or just making things very large, as we mentioned, that it disintegrates. And a worst thing can happen, you can be overpowered. Normally, you will think that if you have a very large country and very large army, it's good for you because it will protect you. No, you actually get overpowered. And those of you who are interested in military history, you'll find that persons like Julius Caesar and Napoleon, they were great commanders of their time. They easily overpowered a larger army, very easily. And even Alexander, he overpowered the Persian army. I mean, it gets overpowered because it attracts attention, and then it gets overpowered. And when you focus too much on life, you tend to become materialistic. And there can be internal strife. And as we know that when you focus too much on life, say for example, uh, present Western civilization is doing, lots of ills come up. But China has a tremendous tenacity. It keeps on overpowering its problems and goes on creating newer problems for itself. In case of analytical minds, this is a very serious problem that a better mind comes and overthrows your system, or a new conclusion comes, a new fact comes, it overthrows your system. Let me tell you a very interesting thing. I'm forgetting the name of the philosopher who wrote it, but he had come up with a very wonderful conclusion that immorality as we understand, is a modern day problem, modern society's problem, in the sense that if if a person is sorry, if a society is primitive, doesn't have exposure to the modern civilization, it won't have immorality. And as happens in the Western world, where they give too much of value to mind, mind power, free thinking, etc., his ideas gained ground. And then it so happened that British, they were moving all over the world, and British people reached Australia too, and then it's, they succeeded in reaching to some tribes in Australia. And there was one young man, they succeeded in teaching him English so that they could communicate. Now, this young boy, this Australian young boy, some of you who know about this incident would find it extremely funny. So he had a particular mark, or maybe broken tooth, something like that. Something that indicated some kind of personal assault. And whenever he was asked about it, how did you get it? He never answered and used to feel shy. Anyway, he was finally succeeded, and then it was told that in spite of being married, he himself had tried to lay hands on someone else's wife. And overnight, the story spread like wildfire, and our philosopher's philosophy was overthrown. If you just read the philosophy, that means Western philosophy of the last 500 years, you will see that our thinkers, I mean, those who consider themselves to be thinkers, they think of something and claim that to be a great contribution. Like nowadays, also, I find people talking about quantum physics and Vedanta, quantum physics and Buddhism, quantum physics and Jainism, and relativity and Advaita. One gentleman had written a book on theory of relativity and Advaita. I mean, how can you make them understand that? Look, physics is all about the realm of the mind, whereas Vedanta and Buddhism, these belong to beyond mind. But no, the problem lies with us in the sense, listeners, we always want something new, something new. So, similarly, there was one economist or maybe a philosopher who had ideas about economy, who would go on talking about the ideal society is one where there won't be any paper money and where won't be this and that, etc. Then one gentleman wrote, yes, yes, I just came across such a society. It was the primitive tribes in such and such island. So recently I met one lady. She is from economics and she was telling me something similar. I said, Madam, to have that kind of equality which you are talking, we will have to become animals. Animals are all equal. So when Marxists talk about equality, just look at animals. They're all the same. They're all equal. To be human means to be unequal. That's the problem with the philosophy that is born of sheer intellect. Acharya Shankara, when he was writing his commentary, very clearly said, you just can't trust intellect. See, dear listeners, those of you who are interested in these things would find it extremely important. Never listen to people who speak through their intellect, by the power of their intellect. And now with Wikipedia and all there, you just have to catch some ideas and build something around that and show as you are the master of new philosophy. No, it doesn't happen that way. And that is what happened with Greek philosophy. Slowly, it made its decadence. Then we had this last kind of civilization, which is Indian. Now, in case of Indian civilization, they more or less followed the same process as Greeks. That means Indian minds, they also went analytically. But in their case, in the case of Indians, the object of study was self. Instead of trying to understand life and instead of trying to understand the external, they were the true philosophers for whom the self was the object of study, which was done by the self. And from there, ultimately, they reached the level of that synthesis where you cannot distinguish whether it is analysis or synthesis. Those of you might have read my book, Carving a Sky. There you'll find this discussion on when you have planks of wood, they're all same. There is sameness. And once you make a chair out of one of those planks, it suddenly gets a new individuality. Chair. But it is also more universal in the sense that it is chair, it's also wood. And now, if you make a carved out thing, ornamental, it now has three individualities. And if you make a throne out of it, now it has four. Like that, it keeps on increasing. Just like that, if you really want to grow in life, you have to grow individually. You have to grow in individuality. But that individuality should lead to more universality. When you know yourself, when you have Atma Gyan, when you have Brahma Gyan, you become unique. The way Jesus Christ was, the way Sri Ramakrishna was, Shankaracharya was, they were unique. But at the same time, they were completely universal. They knew they were one with everyone, every being, and everything in the universe. Nothing was outside them. This is true universality, and this is also true individuality. Now, whatever your type of civilization, the four that I discussed, the fifth one, which I mentioned, that who have minor achievements, well, that's not worthy of discussion here in our talk. In these four types, you find that whatever your goal, whether you want to go on building, for example, now we have in physics huge cyclotrons and huge machines, etc., and nothing new is coming up. Just billions and billions of dollars are being poured. Nothing, you know that physics, as we understand, somewhere has reached its end. A new branch has to come up. Philosophy, they have made it so much that even students of philosophy cannot understand it. Sanskrit literature, it became so complicated that even Sanskrit scholars do not know. So a new thing has to come, new language had to come. So whether you want to make big things or you want to have just pleasures of life, you want to go into analytical thinking as science claims to be, or you want to go into synthesizing all these things as Indians did, you need intellect. And now this intellect, the term that we use, intellect is again of two kinds. The piercing types, as Greeks had, and the second is synthetic type. Again, as I mentioned, synthetic. You have to be analytic. It's not that just you take everything and you don't have analytical mind, because to study scriptures, you need to have analytical mind. So for that, you need a different kind of intellect. Buddhi, normally we use term buddhi for intellect. But if you want to be a path maker, if you want to create something new, indeed new, you have to have medha. Medha cannot be translated into English. Because these Western people, they did not believe in the concept of medha as we understand. So naturally, they didn't have that word medha or equivalent of it. But we had medha. Medha is when you can pierce through the veil of the mind. And of course, even if you have just a mere reflection of that power, you are known as medhavi. It's not merit, it's not intellect. If you translate it, you can say that spatial powers or specialized power that can pierce through any situation, anything, and can reach to the bottom of it. So India realized it long ago that real power is with medha, not with intellect. Intellect is good indeed, because whatever you want to achieve, you need to have intellect. But medha is class apart. You cannot be creative unless you have medha. You cannot be a sage unless you have medha. You cannot be a rishi unless you have medha. So medha is different thing, and that's why our Gāyatrī mantra, the mantra, it prays for medha, dhimahi. Since India realized this, it suggested that one has to take certain steps if one wants to increase one's medha. It's a huge technique, and you might be interested in this. First of it is food. Your food has to be pretty special, and they lay a lot of stress on ghee. Ghee plays a very important role in the increase of medha. And there are other things like you cannot have too much of spicy food, and you cannot have food that make you dull. It has nothing to do with veg non-veg issues. It's a different kind of. They say that if you have food which by nature have essence in them, for example, ghee is the essence of milk. If you have that kind of thing, then your medha will be sharper. Something like they talk about protein food, etc. Second one was you have to work. You have to work very hard. Whatever work you get, whatever work comes your way, you have to work very hard towards it. And studies belong to that aspect of work. You may not be knowing that initially when the Ramakrishna Mission was founded, there was not much money. In fact, there was no money. And even food was scarce and food was bland. And in those days, it was difficult to have books. It was difficult to have teachers who could teach you. And the rare few who wanted to study, the monks in those days, we are talking of 1930s, 1940s, there used to be a lantern in the kitchen and food would be prepared. And those who wanted to study, they sat there and studied. Well, that was the condition of the entire country, so you cannot say that it was something unique. But studying is directly related to hard work. And people who have done hard work, only they can really study well. And then with that comes contemplation. You have to contemplate. You have to slowly learn to make your mind focused. And last is prayer. So when you, these four things, food, very important, work, including studies, third, contemplation, that is contemplation, meditation, and the last, prayer. When all these combine, that is when you can expect to develop your medha. And the Brahmin Varna, people who claim themselves to be Brahmin, they focused a lot on these four. They didn't work much, but they worked on studying the Vedas, studying the scriptures. And the importance of Medha became so much that even today India worships Mother Saraswati. You all know that. And this prayer, that walk, we cross that walk. It's so important. So Medha is so important for the Indians. And India has always been the land of scholarship. No, if India has some respect today, it's because some of our sages had Medha. If you want to define what exactly Medha is, the Sanskrit expression is Grahana Dharana Samarthyam. The power to grasp and the power to retain. If you have these two, the power to grasp and the power to retain, you are considered to be Medhavi. Of course, that specialization where you can pierce through things. There is a situation, there is a subject, you just pierce through it and grasp it. Like Swami Vivekananda had that power. We are studying the Ved, and sages focused a lot on Vedic learning. That means they used to memorize the Vedas and wanted to retain it, try to retain it. And some exceptional ones, they wanted to understand what exactly they are trying to say. Having the whole of Vedic knowledge, This hymn, Medha Janana Sukta, it comes in Atharva Ved, as I mentioned, first book, first hymn. Now, very interesting thing about Atharva Ved, which we had mentioned in the beginning itself, that when the Vedic hymns were collected by Vyasa, well, that's how the story goes. Somebody wrote on our YouTube channel, one of the comments, that no, Vyas didn't do all this. What can we say? It's a tradition. It may not be true. It may be true. Since we have got it in tradition, it's very much true. So what Vyasa did was, he organized the Vedic knowledge, the Veda entirety into four. Rik, Sam, and Yajuḥ. These three were to be used during the Yajna. And whatever he felt was not needed in Yajna or was not in vogue, he put in Atharva Ved. And when the British scholars came to translate these things, East India Company had employed many scholars simply because the mantras of Atharva Ved were not directly used. They declared that it was a later compilation and composition, and moreover, because there are some charms, etc., they declared that it's a book of magic. But we have crossed some of these mantras earlier, and here is one of these hymns. Medha Janan. Janan means to give birth. You might be wondering why we have given such a long introduction. Medha, it can be produced. You can give birth to Medha to yourself, not to others, mind it. Just note the poetry. Normally we see that you acquire Medha. No. The way you can produce fire by rubbing two fire sticks, just like that, by doing certain things. And through those things, as if you put your mind to churning. The way curd is put to churning and butter comes out. You put your intellect to churning. Hard work, noble food, contemplation, and prayer. And Medha is born. And once Medha is born, you can grasp the Vedas, you can retain the Vedas, and you can explain the Vedas. This hymn, it is addressed to Vachaspati. Vachaspati is equated with Brahma. Brahma is the creator god, and it's believed that the popular saying in India is that Brahma breathed out the Vedas at the time of creation. So, since Brahma is the embodiment of the Vedas, and he breathes out the Vedas, it is naturally in the fitness of things that Brahma would be worshipped, that, O Lord, may we have Medha. May we have the power by which we can study the Vedas, we can grasp them, and we can retain that knowledge. But please keep in mind that neither the Vedas nor the Indian tradition ever says that if you don't work, even then you can have Medha or you can achieve anything. Your prayers are just, you can say, like topping. It's just like topping on your hard work. Recently, somebody contacted me. Like, people keep contacting me, and generally, people who contact us, they are not so successful, because those who are really successful, those who know what to do in life, they don't come to us. Sometimes, if I meet someone who has been successful and those who are really capable, I feel so happy. Oh my God, these people are also listening, because what we get through our contacts, through our comments, through the mails, well, It's not flattering. Sad. So that gentleman had written that he has been reciting Hanuman Chalisa 100 times a day. Oh my God, that itself would have made my mind dull. Reciting Hanuman Chalisa 100 times a day. And so he said, and even then, success is eluding him what to do. So I wrote to him that, see, success, the primary thing behind any success is that you have to have the capability. And when top of that capability with prayer, only then success comes. So don't you ever think that mere prayer can do that. No. Well, there might be stories to that effect, but that is not what happens in reality. So this hymn, Medha Janana, Devata is Vachaspati, and Rishi is Atharva. And Atharva Ved might be because Atharva Rishi contributed a lot in this Ved. The first mantra is very intriguing, very and interesting. Ye trishapta paryanti vishwarupani bibrata Vachaspatir bala tesham tanho adya dadhatu me. May Vachaspati give me today their powers of whose? The 3-7 that go about 3 saptah. The 3-7, 3 sapta. Sapta is 7, 3 is 3. The 3-7 that go about bearing many forms. Oh, it's so philosophical, so deep, so intense. Those of you who have been listening to talks on Vedanta or have studied a bit of Vedanta, you might have come across this famous expression that Atman alone abides. And the world that we see, the universe that we see, is just play of name and form. In this hymn of Atharva Veda, it doesn't say that name and form, the play on Atman. It says is a play of what? 3 sapta, 3-7. So there is the 3-7. The 3-7 is the reality on which produces may not be the right word, manifesting, because when you say manifest, it means that appearance is there, but in reality it's not there. So whatever name and form that you see in the universe, there are bacteria and there are viruses and there are this and that, whatever, there are human beings, there are ghosts, there are spirits, and there are gods, there is Brahma. These are all names and forms. Names and forms on what? 3 saptah, 3-7. So the reality is 3-7. All power, all knowledge lie with these 3-7. We will explain what the 3-7 is. The sage prays that may their power of the 3-7, which has the power to create this universe, whatever you see as form, whatever you see as name, whatever you see, these are all produced by 3-7. So, Vachaspati, to whom this prayer is addressed, generally is considered to be the god of speech. Vach, and Vach is speech. And speech, of course, whenever we talk of speech, is directly related to the mind. So Vachaspati is also the god of the mind. However, as we have mentioned many times earlier, that every time there is a prayer of this kind, know that the prayer is actually addressed to God in that particular form. Because, of course, by now you must have realized one thing, that God, the infinite, cannot be contemplated by us. Our mind is limited and we cannot contemplate the infinite through our finite mind. So what we do is we put some upadhi on that infinite God. That means upadhi. Upadhi means some kind of superimposition of strength, of vigor, of knowledge, of compassion, mercy, etc. And then we worship that, knowing very well that catch hold of one and you will catch hold of all. If you worship one, you automatically worship all. The problem with other religions is that they think that that much is the whole. This God is the creator and sustainer of the universe. The universe is created by God, it's sustained by God. And the principles that make this creation possible, the principles that make this creation continue, that is the sum total of knowledge, which is the Veda. Ved means knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge in entirety. So physics, chemistry, biology, these also belong to the Veda. But knowledge in entirety can only be with God, or maybe with Mother Saraswati, who is the embodiment of knowledge. And as far as other beings are concerned, knowledge is distributed among them unevenly, not evenly. So the idea of equality, etc., that doesn't hold here. Unevenly. Some beings have some kind of power, some kind of knowledge. Other beings have other kinds of knowledge and other kind of power. So various gods have different kind of knowledge, different kind of power. Actually, power is directly related to knowledge. For example, if you give me a sword, I won't be able to make use of it. I might use it as a, you can say, as a stick, as a hammer, but not as a fencer. The real fencer, he can use the sword, but not me. Now comes 3 Saptah, 777. Of course, not many commentaries are available on the Vedas, but what little we have, they explain these 3-7 variously. The commentators and the scholars who have knowledge of these, they say that the universe, the universe has 3 and 7 as warp and woof. That means the fundamental structure, when you make something, initially you draw the boundaries. And with the boundaries, you also make compartments based on which the whole thing will stand up. They say that 3 is a very important number which pervades throughout the universe. First is Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Those of you who have been listening to our talks would know well that when creation takes place, Prakriti, Mother Nature, it gets into action. Prakriti is a balance of these 3 qualities, Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Sattva is stability, Rajas is kinetic, and Tamas is inertia. Sattva is nobility, Rajas is passion, Tamas is violence. Whatever is there in this universe and wherever, everything is a mixture of these 3. These 3 always stay together and they try to overpower each other. These are actually the finest particles, much finer than electron, proton, etc. Because these are mere qualities. So you cannot say that. Like in physics, we have matter energy duality, energy particle duality, etc. Particle energy. So, and they call it wavicles, wave and particles duality. But Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, they are qualities and particles. as they continue with the process of creation, they become more and more of particles, and yet they retain their qualities. So we have to come up with a special term combining quality and particle. We can say partiality or partity or whatever it is. Similarly, we have three lokas. Those of you who have been listening to our talks remember there is Sthul, the physical universe, the Sukshma Jagat, which is of the gods and goddesses, and Karan Jagat, where God alone exists. Beyond that, that's not Jagat. So we have three Jagat, three worlds. Sthul, Sukshma, Karan, or Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. Similarly, they say that there are three gods, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. The three plays a very important role in creation and sustenance of the universe. Then the other one is seven. Now these three, which are the fundamental to the universe, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, Sthul, Sukshma, Karan, Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, they get further extended by seven. And seven, we just mentioned Sthul, Sukshma, Karan, but there are seven lokas, they say, actually. Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha. And then we have Jana, Maha, Tapa, Satya. And then we have Vedic fires, which are of seven kinds. And they say that creation is furthered by the seven sages, Saptarshi. And the Vedas have seven meters. In the foundation, we have three. And these are extended by the seven other. So ultimately, 3 into 7 make this universe. Whatever is there in the universe is just a manifestation of 3 and 7. You may say that, okay, why go for all this? And simply say that Atman, which appears as name and form in the universe, may that power come to us. Yes, it's as good. But then we are studying the Veda, and the sage, he saw the universe in this form. And he's praying perfectly all right. Nothing wrong with that. Thus, the manifestation of the universe is actually of 3 and 7. And the sage prays that he may have the knowledge of the universe in entirety. Just see how they are moving from analysis to synthesis. First, they're talking about the analytical aspect where it's 3. And then there is the synthetic aspect where they want to know the whole universe. But you cannot know the whole universe, but you can know Veda in totality. That's possible. If you have that knowledge of the Vedas, you have the knowledge of the universe. And for that, if you want to have that knowledge, what do you need? First is you need to study. And you have to retain, as we mentioned, Grandharan. And that's why you have this Medha. Without Medha, you cannot have Vedic knowledge. And definitely you can never retain this Vedic knowledge. The second mantra, it says, Punarehi vachaspate devena manasa saha vasospate ni ramaya mayya vastu mai shrutam. Come again, Vachaspati. With divine intelligence. As we mentioned, Vachaspati is equated with intelligence, divine intelligence. And then Vasospati. Vachaspati and Vasospati. Make it stay in me. In myself be what is heard. See, in most cases, we study but we cannot retain it. I can definitely raise my hand and say, well, as if this mantra is describing my plight when I was in school and college, that I would study, but I could retain nothing. That's impossible because I was not interested in those things. I don't know what I was interested in. Mostly I was interested in storybooks. I found them fascinating. Sorry. So it says that this power, this medha, which helps you grasp and retain, this is to Brahma, the Lord of minds, which is Vachaspati, as we mentioned. And whatever you hear, by hearing we mean Vedic knowledge, because in earlier times, Vedas were learned through hearing from the mouth of Guru, Shruti. The idea was the Vedas were Shruti, you heard it from your teacher, you memorized them, you repeated them, you memorized them, and you wanted it retained throughout your life. And Vasospati, although it's related to Vachaspati, but to distinguish, Vasospati is known as preserver of noble qualities. Now, this is again a very interesting thing, that first line talks about Vachaspati, second line talks about Vasospati, the preserver of noble qualities. If you don't have noble qualities, you will have poor memory. If you have poor memory, that means you are not able to retain what you are listening to. Means that you don't have noble qualities. If your personality is noble, if divine qualities are there in your personality, you will be able to retain whatever you hear. I know of two stories. I mean, I know hundreds of such stories, but right now two come to my mind. One is I had read somewhere in the story form. It was about two gentlemen were quarreling, and they were British people, and the one slapped the other. And there was one Brahmin taking bath in Ganga, and later on the case went up to the court, and he was brought as a witness, and he said, well, I don't know the language they were arguing in, but I can repeat, mind it, I can repeat what who said what. The judge couldn't believe. He said, okay, repeat. And then that learned Brahmin, he just went on repeating everything that had happened. This gentleman said this without understanding a word, and this gentleman said this. I had read it somewhere. I cannot say if it is true or not. The another incident was with one of our monks, and he was a very senior monk, and he died some years ago. And he told me that his own grandfather, he was a great scholar and learned person, etc., etc. And it so happened that once this our monk, senior monk, he was making fun of him, telling, look, you know Sanskrit, but you don't know English, and English is the language, modern language, etc., etc. Then his grandfather, who was a scholar, said, okay, fine, I'm all attentions. Say whatever you have to say. And he went on narrating passages from here and there. He was a young boy, maybe in class 6, 7, like that. And he kept on listening. And he repeated the whole thing. Now, I don't find any reason why this monk would be telling a lie. There's absolutely no reason why. Because I had highest respect for him. He was a great person, a scholar, a great painter, a great singer, magician, etc. There's absolutely no reason. He was just narrating the power of this memory retention. And then he was narrating another incident of one of the Brahmins of Varanasi. This Swamiji was once posted in Varanasi, and he used to go to that scholar to study things. And sometimes that scholar had become very old. And while explaining something, he would just become silent. He would just become silent for a while, close his eyes, and suddenly he would say, Guruji kahte the. Guruji. His Guruji used to say. And then he would come up with something very strange. That, okay, such and such thing, explanation of that. And once I read, there was one great vocalist in Pakistan, and he knew a lot of rag, etc. And then there was some instrument player, very famous person in Pakistan, and he had become very rich. And he felt that these things would be lost forever. And he invited that musician to stay with him and said, Sir, you please stay with me. And whenever you remember something from the past, please tell us, and it will be recorded. So he stayed there for years, and sometimes he used to be taking bath, and suddenly something about some rag would come. And there would be somebody always with him to record whatever he was saying. So, well, if you have noble qualities, you will be able to retain what you hear. Whatever I have been telling, these are not stories, these are facts. The problem is that because we don't have noble qualities, we keep on condemning noble qualities. यह अभिवी तनुभे आर्तनी इव जया वाचस्पतिर्नि यच्छतु मय्ये वास्तु मयि श्रुतम. Prayer is to God or to Vachaspati. Just here, stretch your twin grace like the two bow ends strained with cord. May Vachaspati make fast in me be knowledge, in myself be what I learned. This Grandharan I have been talking. Says twin grace. May I grasp, may I retain, O Vachaspati. And may your grace, says, stretch your twin grace. Those of you might have seen a stringed instrument, or maybe this bow and arrows. Wow. You find there are two ends, and there is a string attached to that. So string is as if stretched, says, just like that. Stretch your grace. This is poetry, plain poetry. Essentially, it means that have grace on me. It's being said in an extremely poetic way. Does this grace come from outside? No. Every knowledge, every power, every grace comes from inside, comes from within. But because we are not advanced, we are not that advanced, we like to see our divinity in external form, and then we worship that external form as God, and we ask for compassion, mercy, and grace from that God. That is how it is. That is how it is, and that's how we offer prayers, and that's how we gain things. And a time may come when you realize that every prayer that was answered to you was answered from within, not from outside. Upahuto vachaspate upasman vachaspatir havyatam samshrutena game mahi ma shrutena viradhisi. This is ancient Sanskrit, and to say that Atharva Veda is a later composition is so silly. Vachaspati has been invoked because prayer has been made such a short prayer. May he give us inspiration. And may we adhere to sacred knowledge. Never may we go away from it. This is philosophically, it's simply exalted. He says, Vachaspati has been invoked. may give us inspiration, that Medha, and may we adhere to sacred knowledge, the knowledge that you acquire from the Veda, and may we never go away from it. What is very interesting about this verse is it is treating knowledge as an end. Normally, what happens, we use knowledge as a means very often. For example, if you talk to students who are studying in colleges and universities, for them, knowledge is equated with a degree. There is one scientist, I think, or a professor in America, he had wonderfully said the best way to teach children these days is the day they take admission, give them a degree. After that, only those who are interested in the subject will continue to be there, and the class will not be disturbed. And at least there will be some people who will get into serious study. Because those who are not interested in studies, those who want only degrees, they are the greatest nuisance maker in the class. I know, I really know it, because since my young age, I was barely 20 when I joined the Ramakrishna Mission. Since then, I've been more or less into teaching. And classes are always disturbed by people who are not interested in learning. So give them a degree and say, fine, you have a degree, now you go. Those who want knowledge, they will have it. Because you equate knowledge with means. You think that through knowledge you can have this, through knowledge you can have it. But as far as Vedic knowledge is concerned, is treated as an end by itself. It's an end in itself. If you have the Vedic knowledge, you are blessed. That's enough. You don't need anything. If you know a subject, that's enough. You don't have to apply it again. For example, there was William James, and he came up with the philosophy of pragmatism. Those who have studied philosophy know pragmatism, and he equated everything with money making. And that's how, the main philosophy of America is pragmatism. They measure everything through its power of making dollars. And that's how America became dollar worshipper. And now Indians who are dollar worshippers, they end up there. But spiritual knowledge is an end in itself. Knowledge may be power, knowledge may be money for others. But for the spiritual persons, knowledge is one with self-knowledge. And when you acquire Vedic knowledge, and you feel established in the Vedic knowledge, with no desire to implement it here or there, you have taken one step. So, that's the importance of this hymn. Shows what is Medha, what's its importance, how to get it, and why. So that's it. And our next talk will be on freedom from fear. Thank you so much. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat.